Well, you'll have to forgive me. My only language is English. So I'm hoping that's okay. If I speak slowly enough, it might come across relatively well. And actually, I talk really fast, so that would be a problem for me in general. And so we have about an hour, right? We're going to go right about 8 o'clock or so. And so I have a lot of content to cover, and there's a lot of interesting topics here. I had to kind of narrow down the amount of topics we could speak about in this 1 hour time frame. But we have a lot of things going on at JBoss, and there's a lot of aspects to SOA or REST technology that we're very much focused on. Hopefully we'll cover some of that in today's session, and it'll be valuable for you guys going forward. How many people here have used JBoss in some form or fashion? A JBoss project? Application server, Drools, JBPM? Okay, so a large percentage of you have used something out there for JBoss. And so at JBoss we have a large number of projects, so we're always adding projects. Like a project that we just recently added that falls under my area is a project called Tohu, or Torhu, T-O-H-U. And it's a Drools-based project, or sub-project, that allows you to interact with and prompt an end user for questions, and it builds a decision tree. So all you do is build business rules, and it starts asking the user questions. You don't have to build a user interface. You don't have to do anything other than write the rules. And it'll start saying, what is your name, phone number, and address? And the user will respond. And based on the address, you can ask them yet another set of questions. Like if you live in a certain part of the world, like Prague, Czech Republic, then I might want to know, do you attend the local user group? And if you do attend the local user group, then I might want to know where you work. And if you do work for Sun or HP, let's say, I might then want to know approximately where you got your university education. And so this dialogue with the user can continue on back and forth, and all you do is specify business rules. So like that's one example of a brand new project that we just started. Another one is the Erai project, E-R-R-A-I, that's related to basically messaging communications within the browser. So how many people here have done not rich internet applications, but true fat client development, like a Swing or .NET or something like that? Okay, a large number of you. So one of the things you can do in a Swing world, right, is you can actually communicate between component and component very easily. You have to build your own infrastructure for that, like you might build your own messaging bus and things like that. But in a web world, it's hard to do. Right? It's actually fairly difficult to get the widget over here to talk to the widget over here without going back to the server and back again. Right? Submit the whole page, get a response back, the whole page redrawn. In the Ajax world, you can actually make the two components talk to each other. So we have another project right now where a guy has built a Google Web Toolkit extension. Right? It's based on Google Web Toolkit, but it extends it so you can actually have inter-component communications, which is pretty nice. So think of that as having like a drop-down list box over here, and as you make the change, it can immediately tell this other component, which doesn't even know about the previous component, to update its result set. So if I pick a different country, I see a different list of states or provinces, things like that. So it makes it much more of a Swing-based application environment or .NET influence. So we have a lot of things we're working on, and I just want to give you a little bit of that perspective. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. So I run the local Java user group in Atlanta. So we have meetings like you guys are having one right now, and we speak to different topics from different vendors, like Sun will speak to us, or HP, or Oracle, or IBM. But we also have a lot of local people who will give us presentations around the technologies they're using at their job. So they might be using something like a Swing-based application, and they're developing in Swing, or they might be doing something with Google Web Toolkit, or they might be doing something with Spring MVC, or they might be doing something with really deep dive hibernate technology. And so we'll have those sessions in Atlanta every month. As soon as I fly back to Atlanta, I'll be just in time for my meeting there. So when I fly back next Monday, next Tuesday. So let me talk to you a little bit about what we're doing on the REST SOA front, and I'm also throwing in complex image processing, because it's an interesting topic to me. And we're doing some really interesting things in complex image processing. My area is JBoss ESP, RiffSaw, which is our BPEL project, JBPM. You guys have probably heard of JBPM before. It's pretty popular out there for business process management technology. Embeddable workflow for Java developers. And Drools, which is our business rule engine, but it also does a lot more than business rules now. So I don't have slides that give you really an overview of a lot of these things. I'm more focused on REST, SOA, complex image processing topics. Okay? One of the things I like to talk about these days is SOA dead? You know, so for some of you, you've not even got to the SOA thing yet, and already it's dead, right? And that's pretty common in our industry. So what you'll often see in the IT industry overall is that things build up a huge hype. And then they kind of fall off the end of that hype, and no one cares anymore. So if you actually have heard of the Gartner hype cycle, have you seen that chart before? It basically looks like this. Now, I draw a picture, but you did a great job cleaning the boards. It goes up, right? Hype, 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 hype. Everybody's really excited. It's going to feed the hungry, right? It's going to cure cancer. It's going to eliminate all programmers. We won't ever need programmers again. You guys have heard the hype that's always coming from our industry. And every new technology is supposed to remove all programmers from the industry, right? You guys have seen that one? .NET is supposed to eliminate programmers. All they do is point and click, right? And so you get that with SOA. You don't need programmers anymore because all you do is hook services together. You don't need to write code anymore. And so you always see all that hype associated with these technologies. And then what happens is it falls into what is called a trough of disillusionment from the Gartner perspective. And then eventually comes out of that to the slope of enlightenment, and eventually people are really using technology. So SOA is now coming out of the trough of disillusionment, and people are really implementing SOA at their companies now. But I'll give you an overview of what we're talking about there. So is SOA dead? The report of my death was an exaggeration, a famous quote from Mark Twain. All right? So some people are very focused on ROA now, resource-oriented architecture, or WOA, so web-oriented architecture. So resource-oriented architecture is based on REST principles. REST, of course, by Roy Fielding. I think there's a session after this one that will focus a lot specifically on REST, so I won't give you too much there. But web-oriented architecture, of course, are the principles of the internet itself, the World Wide Web. The concept that I can use a get, or a put, or a post, or delete. And I can hook together things through URLs or URIs. That basic concept, of course, is what people are now saying eliminates SOA. You shouldn't use SOAP and web services because you can do everything you want to do, but REST with get, put, post, and delete, and everything with the URI. So that simple concept has really kind of taken on a lot of steam in the industry right now. People seem to be very excited about it. But one thing that's important to note is SOA, service-oriented architecture, is not SOAP. It's not what used to be called Simple Object Access Protocol. SOAP no longer stands for Simple Object Access Protocol because it's no longer simple. Right? You guys have seen that. If you looked at the specifications, they're about this thick, right? For the worldwide, for the web service specifications. So it's no longer simple, and we just call it SOAP. But SOA is not SOAP, and SOA is not web services star, the web services splat. SOA is a set of design principles, right? Think of it as design principles, best practices, and that's all it is. It's a design, architectural design pattern. Okay? Some technical differences. SOAP kind of makes you focus on post. Everything works through a post in the SOAP world. REST, you can use post, but also get, put, delete. Normally, SOAP is still over HTTP. REST is, of course, based on HTTP, Hypertext Transport Protocol. So that simple concept alone makes it slightly different, and kind of makes it a little more powerful if you're a REST person. You can use a GET now instead of just working with a POST. Some people find that to be very, very nice. There's a contract definition in the SOAP world called WSDL, Web Service Definition Language or Description Language. There is not one of those necessarily in the REST world. So some people find WSDL to be horrible. Some people hate WSDL. And if you had to look at WSDL and edit WSDL by hand, it is pretty painful to use. So that's why you have to have advanced tools and things like that. So the RESTful people will say, WSDL's bad, it's cumbersome, it's too much, look at all that XML stuff, I don't want to see any more of that. Can we get rid of that? So typically in the REST world, you base things on get, put, post, and delete. Those are specific operations that you would find in a WSDL document. And message may or may not have a contract. In other words, I can just shoot XML with the wire. I don't have to have a schema. I don't have to have a definition for it necessarily. In a SOAP world, you pretty much have everything as XML. Okay? In a REST world, you can have XML, but a lot of people use JSON. JavaScript documentation is incredibly popular in the REST world. And of course, Atom RSS. Granted, these two are also XML based, but JSON's not. It's actually JavaScript object declarations. So that's a fairly popular content type to return in a RESTful world. Okay? For clients, you have to have a client that understands WSDL. So you often see us use SOAP client, or SOAP UI. Sorry, you guys see the SOAP UI utility? They use that a lot in my demonstrations. I don't have it on here. but to interact with a SOAP endpoint. In a REST world, you pretty much will use a browser to interact with it. Does that make sense? You guys have seen all this before, right? No, nothing new here. Okay? One thing that's interesting beyond REST in the SOA world is people are now talking about EDA, event-driven architecture. The idea is that I don't need SOA, I don't even need REST. I do everything in an event-based way. I want EDA, event-driven architecture. And so my point with all of this is that you can actually get all of these things in the same solution. You don't have to have a REST-only solution, and you don't have to discard or throw away SOAP or SOA, right? You can also have a SOA solution that allows for RESTful interaction. You can have an event-driven solution, which works in an asynchronous request-response model, also doing synchronous request and responses. So you can combine all three of these philosophies, if you will, or design patterns or architectural styles into a single solution, and you need to bring the right tools to the right job. Okay? So at a high level, I use this chart to kind of put things in perspective. There's an enterprise service bus technology that we've been building at JBoss. You know, JBoss is very famous for application server technology, which application servers are very useful for Java EE, you know, servlets, enterprise Java beans, JNDI, and I want JPA, Java Persistence Architecture, those kind of things. Everybody knows what those tools will do. In the case of an enterprise service bus technology, it just adds to those tools. Okay? So everybody knows what a servlet does. Everybody primarily knows what a JMS thing will do. But now we're talking about things like routers and transformers and doing things like mediated services or orchestration. These are just additional tools that you can bring to your project. So if you think of it like that, it's actually fairly simple to grow your way to some additional capability. And there's a lot of technology out there in open source related to this kind of capability. You guys, I'm sure, have heard of the Mule ESB or Service Mix technology, or maybe you've seen Camel, Apache Camel, James Strachan's project. So there's a lot of other projects out there in open source now that are starting to address this space. One of the key things to have in an enterprise service bus world is transport mediation. I can basically speak now, not just HTTP or RMI over IOP from Java EE, right? So in J2E world, we had servlets and we had enterprise Java beans. So we spoke two protocols, HTTP, RMI over IOP. Now, in this world, I can speak to this via FTP. I can drop files to it. I can throw GMS messages at it. I can actually let it look for changes in the database, right? So as a new row shows up in the database, this thing then gets woken up and invoked. I can also, speak to it through direct socket communication, throwing bytes down the wire over the socket. And in a RESTful world, okay? In a RESTful world, it's just this HTTP guy here. So if I wanted to come here and simply do this, we'll call that REST. Okay? So the concept that REST is simply based on HTTP means that if you do HTTP, you can do REST. Now there are some utilities and shortcuts making it easier, and I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, REST is just an HTTP-based thing, right? As long as you get put, post, and delete, you can manage the whole URI, you can change the content type that goes back, you can manage HTTP response codes like 200 and 404 and 402 and 500, and you can actually make a RESTful application. And it's just yet another API into your existing business logic. Right? So an enterprise service bus is there to transform or translate these different transport protocols into something that is universal for your business logic. So your business logic should not care if it's responding to a RESTful request, or a SOAP request, or an enterprise Java bean request, or a TCP/IP socket request. They're just different types of requests. It's managed through this middleware. Once you receive an event, right, through one of these transports, you can transform it, you can route it, secure it, add management capabilities to it. There's a registry built into this based on, the new one is based on UDB IB3. That's the Apache Judy project. So the Apache Judy project is sponsored by JBoss. We have the core contributors to the Apache Judy project, and UDBI is part of this equation as well. So think of that as JIMD for Java developers. So if you're a J2E person, that's just JNDI, but this is the web services version of it. All right? You can store things. You also have declarative orchestration. I'll show you a quick demo of that. Both JPDL is based on JVPM. I'll show you a demo of JVPM. But we're also working on a BPEL orchestration solution, which is our project RiffSaw, based on Apache Ode project, ODE. And complex event processing, I have a demo of that as well to show you what that looks like. But think of it as I have different ways to receive events into the bus, and then I want to do advanced complex processing across multiple streams simultaneously. So I can look at several streams simultaneously and make decisions based on a certain window, sliding time window of those event streams. Okay? And then there's different ways to build your mediators or your business logic. We won't spend a lot of time on that. In the case of our enterprise service bus architecture, though, we spend a lot of time up front blending the models of JVPM, Drools, and ESB, and JBoss application server. So we took advantage of all the things that we had at JBoss, and we created an enterprise service bus architecture out of that. So you can have declarative business processes that drive service orchestration, interact with humans, and upon interaction, or upon the next service invocation, execute advanced business rules through the Reedy-based rules engine. And then, of course, do everything that JBoss can do overall, like run enterprise Java meetings, or run Hibernate, or run JMS, etc. So that concept of understanding what the context is, what is the business process that you're working in, is important. So we have actually blended these models. And the reason it's a good blending is because think about your business process. Think about your business rules. You want to execute the same business rules and the same business process for every transaction you receive, regardless of how you receive the transaction. So most of us probably build, how many people build web applications like Strut, Spring Hibernate, and JSF or Strut? Okay, great. So most people, when I do a Java user group presentation, build web applications. So that means you put your HTML form up on screen and you hit the submit button. That's normally a post back to a servlet or something, right? Or your middleware technology, your controller. And then that, of course, does persistence or something of that nature. Well, that's great. But what if I want to send you orders and I'm an important customer and I am not going to sit on your website and put each order in individually? I want to send you 500 orders in a batch file over FTP. You want the same business rules and business process to react to those 500 as for each individual one being entered on the website. So that's what this concept is all about here. Okay? So there's some monitoring and management capability. There's a new project called Jopr, J-O-P-R, right, where we've taken all this technology and it's been all open source. So if you want to see distributed management and monitoring capability, go to the Jopr project and get access to this. So there's a number of projects that are out there on JBoss board now. Okay? A little bit about REST. So there's another project called REST Easy. All right? It's a JAX RS implementation, which is a specification for new annotations around basically using annotations to take this POJO and make it a RESTful endpoint. So it used to be you'd have to write a servlet to respond and get, put, post, and delete. Now you can basically make a very simple program, or a very simple .java component that basically has @get, @put, @post, @delete, and it'll respond accordingly based on the method that you've annotated. I'll show you a quick example of that. So REST Easy has some annotations for POJOs. Those are based on the specification. It has march orders for like JSON, RSS, Atom. So if you want to produce an Atom feed, all you do is kind of annotate that and you're ready to roll. It has support for gzip compression and decompression. So if you're interacting with a RESTful client and they want to send you a zipped set of XML, let's say, this will decompress it for you. And if you have to respond back with a zip, you can. HTTP cache settings, these are extensions beyond the specification. So you can actually interact with HTTP cache. Think that as the browser cache, right? But in the case of the RESTful world, it might not really be a browser talking to you, but it still might cache the results, right? That's how the World Wide Web scales. It has a very nice distributed caching model, and a RESTful architecture should take advantage of that caching model. You can also do asynchronous requests and responses, or asynchronous jobs, REST Easy. And there's even a client-side framework, which is very nice. So in other words, not only can you produce RESTful endpoints, you can also consume RESTful endpoints. Because it's actually kind of hard in Java to consume RESTful endpoints. It actually is. It's much easier in Groovy. I tend to use Groovy for interacting with a RESTful endpoint more so than Java, because Java just requires a lot of setup. You got to interact with it through the URL connection, you got to parse the XML that comes back to you, things like that. So he has a client-side framework he's done there. This is Bill Burke's project. Who's been with JBoss since 2001. Okay? This is what it might look like, a little snippet here. You can see if there's an HTTP GET for orders at 3323. You can see here it says path orders. This is public class order service. Path order ID, so 3323 shows up here as order ID. Responds to GET, and it produces XML. So all you do is annotate your component with these annotations from a JAX-RS specification, and then you have those capabilities. And you have a RESTful endpoint. So again, you don't have to build the whole servlet like you would used to in the older world if you want to be RESTful capability. Here's a more detailed example, but it basically shows you the same thing. You provide the path, right? And then you post, get. So this one handles post, this one handles get. Right? So typically on a post, you're going to create a resource. On a get, you're going to read and deliver a resource. As an example. All right? So that's just a quick overview of REST Easy. We also can do HTTP things on the Enterprise Service Bus as well. And so I have a demo of that. But it should be noted that czjug CSP is not hardwired into web services or JMS. So some people perceive that an Enterprise Service Bus is all about web services, and it's not. Right? It's simply an event-driven architecture that allows you to respond to multiple transport types. So if you can actually think of RESTful interactions with get, put, post, and delete for HTTP, and you can even actually respond to them with Groovy and JavaScript. But at the same time, Groovy and JavaScript clients are often your best consumers of RESTful endpoints. Right? So in other words, if I'm talking to a JavaScript client, it primarily wants a RESTful interaction. It does not want a JMS interaction. It doesn't speak JMS. It doesn't really want SOA necessarily. There are JavaScript libraries for SOA, but it doesn't really like that either for parsing wisdom. But it's very happy to do basic HTTP connections like get, put, post, and delete, and actually making an interaction like that. Okay? So in czjug CSP XML, there's a new way to set up HTTP, and then of course you respond to it with a generic service, ESP service. So this is just an example of what the XML looks like. And you can see in this case it's responding to a cell's URL pattern. And then of course, what I've done is I've built a little demo that responds to it with an Atom feed. What this means is everything that's processing in my environment, I can come along and actually feed it Atom. Okay? The reason why this might be useful to you, if you think about it, a Java client can speak JMS, typically, or RMI. A .NET client primarily wants to speak to you via web services. I normally do a .NET demo, I'm running here now. And then JavaScript clients want to speak to you over HTTP. Okay? But the ESP handles that transport mediation, so the same business logic executes no matter what. The same logic responds to either option. So I'll just show you a little demo that I built here. I do a lot of live demonstrations. Sometimes they don't work. You guys seen that happen before? Okay. So right here, I have this quick start Atom Publisher 2.esp in my deploy directory. Anything you put in the deploy directory for JBoss is automatically hot deployed. If you hit the delete key to remove it, it's automatically hot undeployed. That's a thing that JBoss has been doing now for at least 7, 8 years. And people find it pretty productive and exciting. But I already have it up and running. And what it's doing, this particular example is actually feeding this URL. Okay? So you can see I don't have any news yet. This URL right here is being responded to by this component right here. This component right here. So this guy right here is listening for a GET request on this guy here. But it doesn't have any data to display. So one of the things it also does is it listens for changes at this level. So if I actually change this file here, from done to .xml, if you watch it, it gets consumed real fast. So you're going to have to watch it carefully there because it gets consumed quickly. And what it is I simply have a file puller out there. Okay, and you can see there's some activity coming back here on my application server. But now if I hit get, okay, I have news. So again, I have two interactions happening with the same component. It's listening for files that are changing on the hard drive, and that simply becomes newsworthy information that also can be sent out via Atom. So it's a simple example, but if you look around the REST world, they're all about Atom in many cases. If you look at people who blog about REST and they focus on RESTful architecture, they think Atom is one of the best ways to actually communicate over the wire, the Atom format itself. So this is an example of that. And it's a real simple thing. I can show you quickly what the code looks like. Okay, in this example here. One, I'm using Rome to get the format of it correctly. I haven't used REST Easy just yet. I'm going to switch to REST Easy, but right now I'm using Rome and JDOT there. And then if I look here at the source code, okay, you can see it's pretty straightforward. There's an action here. This is part of the way the ESP works. Okay? And it basically handles the syndication. You can see it goes through the syndication entry, syndication content. Alright? Set title, set link, set the entries. And so every time I make an update to the file system, a new entry is created so that it shows up. So that's a very simple example of a RESTful interaction, in this case with Enterprise Service Bus, but you can also respond to any kind of other interaction you want to interact with it. So I can interact with it through JMS or FTP or file listening, or in this case, HTTP. And that's a very simple demo. I have some more interesting ones, but we got to keep moving so we don't run out of time. Okay? Make sense so far? One of the things we're working on at JBoss, in addition to the REST Easy project, we're also trying to specify some, I don't want to say standards around REST, but one of the things that, so Bill Burke is writing a book. We implemented REST Easy, and now he's writing a book on REST. And one of the things that you'll find in the RESTful world is that even though you implement REST, I read REST, we actually still can't talk to each other. Because people implement it differently. And it's not like the web services world where there's specific specifications that require interoperability across multiple vendors and multiple implementations. And the RESTful world is actually fairly easy to make it so that the other guy can't talk to you. Because it's based on get, put, post, and delete. What do we stick in the payload? Whatever you want, right? So because all the flexibility is there, there's some goals to actually expose RESTful architecture across some things. Like in this case, you can see BPM. So if I have a BPM engine, what should be the RESTful API of that BPM engine, as an example, for business process management? And we're working on some examples of that. If you have a JMS endpoint, like I want to actually have a queue, JMS queue to interact with, what should be the RESTful way to interact with the JMS queue? So I can interact with it through my browser. So that's really the purpose of this. And there are some people out there who don't like this concept. We've certainly seen that. People don't want any form of standardization in the RESTful world. But we do see the fact that if there are people out there who are trying to build both halves of this equation, they need to have some idea of what the other guy is going to do so that it makes it easy for you to build your applications for business-to-business integration. Right now, SOAP, Simple Object Access Protocol, is the right way to do business-to-business interactions because there's nice tight specifications that both business parties will implement. REST makes it a little bit more challenging because each RESTful person you interact with has a unique API, right? They have unique data payloads in most cases. Yeah, they still use get, put, post, and delete, but what they send back to you is unique to them in many cases. So it makes it a little more challenging. So a little bit about complex event processing. And this is a very fun area that I really have enjoyed working with. But if you think of a large business, a large enterprise, and I assume some of you guys work for larger organizations, or you will one day if you're currently a student or something like that. A larger organization has a lot of systems that they've purchased, or they've built, or they've acquired when they pulled in another company and made an acquisition. These things are all built with different technologies. Some of them might be COBOL on the mainframe, or RPG on the AS400. They might be Java-based applications or .NET applications, or God forbid, old school VB applications. And I promise I won't show you any VB code. I have that in some of my demos too. But normally in Java crowd, people start running out of the room when we see Visual Basic code, right? But the idea here is that different types of applications in my environment represent different business processes. They represent different business workflows. And they do. We don't think that they're business processes. We don't think of them as workflows, but they are. They always are. We just may not know what the workflow is. We just may not be able to draw the diagram. But there is one somewhere. So in other words, if I purchased SAP and I installed it in my company, there's workflows built into SAP. So that's really what I was trying to represent here. So in each of these different workflows and different applications that are out there is data that is interesting that is happening in those systems. Not all the data is interesting. Some of the data is interesting. So in other words, if a new order comes into the system, the fact that there's a new order is somewhat interesting, especially if that new order is for over $10,000. Right? I use dollars being from America. Over 10,000 crowns, which isn't a whole lot. Over 10,000 crowns. Is that how you say crowns? How do you say the money here? Okay. The idea, how about euros? There we go, 10,000 euros, which is a lot of money. But the concept of replenishment, right? I have to order a product and receive it. I might have a market monitor. In other words, I trade commodities, therefore I'm watching the market conditions, and that impacts my business logic. I have receiving, so I can't sell something I don't have. And if I do sell something, I might have to then replenish it, then I have to receive it, in which case it goes back into inventory and impacts all my accounting data. So this concept here is actually in every business. Every business that sells something, basically. And you can see these all create events, and these events are interesting to us. So the concept is I can have an event declaration, and I can also have an event selection. In this case, I'm specifically looking at stocks over a period of time. So over a 1-minute window, average the price of that stock. Okay? So all this logic right here does, so this is the DRL, the rules language, that's allowing you to actually look at data over a period of time. And it will automatically expire the data that is old. So after 1 minute has passed, it discards the old data. It retracts the facts at rule speed. And then you no longer have to worry about it, which means it's now available for garbage collection at the JVM level. So you keep feeding streams into this engine. You keep pumping in, let's say, 500 transactions a second. Boom, new transaction, new transaction, new transaction. It's looking at a window in time, and as the data becomes old, it discards it. Because you're only looking at specific time windows in this kind of concept. All right, so you can declaratively identify an event, all right, and then you can use a rule to specifically interact with that event. Here's another example in our DSL, domain-specific language. You could also make your own DSL using Czech language. One of the examples we have is Brazilian Portuguese, because one of the guys on the team is Brazilian, so he'll do one in Brazilian Portuguese. But you can see when order total is greater than 150, over a 15-second window, then notify somebody. All right? Here's what it looks like in its true form, right, the DRL form. But this is all the rules language, the rules project. Okay? So it's a stateful rules engine. You're going to use it to look for interesting data over a sliding time window. All right? It can aggregate and accumulate over that time window. You'll see summations in this case. And then you can actually push events back out to the bus. So here's a diagram that can illustrate that point. The idea is that I can receive data through all these different channels. I can sit out there and intercept different events that are happening within my enterprise. Like a new order over here, new customer, employee log in, employee log out, jackpot winner. So the examples you'll see in this space are like a slot machine, for a jackpot winner, or employee time in, time out, clock in, clock out, those kind of events. I will normally have a normal processing trail, but I will identify interesting data or interesting events, and I will use my CEP stateful service to collect that data and analyze it over a period of time. This guy right here basically is using JVM heap. It runs inside a Java virtual machine. It's using the heap. So you've got to have enough heap to handle this. It might be that you need a good 8 gigabyte heap space to handle it. People do that in this kind of application technology. But what it allows you to do is look at a bunch of data, and of course, if it expires and becomes old, it'll garbage collect automatically. And then if you find something interesting, then you can RSS somebody, or email somebody, or JMS somebody. Okay? So I'll show you what that demo looks like, and you can tell me if it's interesting to you or not. Let's see here. And I kind of do everything on command line through AMP. And I use Notepad++ or UltraEdit. Yeah, I can use Eclipse too, but that's no fun. Like here's my Eclipse running back here with my JPPM process. So I have that there. I guess I didn't show you the business process stuff there. But let's see here. Okay. We need to be able to see this guy here. So it looks like I added one. All right, it's still actually compiling the business rules. Once you see it's compiled. Okay, now it's compiled. All right, so I'm adding 1, 1, 1, And if I wait 5 seconds, notice it came up to 5, it's back down to 1. The previous items I added, these are all objects I'm setting in. All right, I'm actually creating objects and putting them in the heap, and then they get expired based on the fact that I'm waiting long enough. It's actually more obvious if I put in something bigger. So look down here, we're at 2 right now, but I bet if I hit send, it's going to be 10 because the 2 expired. If I hit the button fast enough, the number gets rather large. But if I wait 5 more seconds, it's back down to 2. So I created that many objects in memory, but then I'm looking at a 5-second sliding window. The one, if they're now 5 seconds plus, they expire and they go away. So while this is not a very interesting example because it doesn't do anything with the data, it is interesting that you see the data expiring quickly. All right? To show you the more advanced example. All right, let's look at that one. We'll remove that one. And deploy that one. All right, all I'm doing when I do a deploy is that it's actually pushing it out there to the deploy directory and hot deploying it. So in other words, if I look at here in my deploy directory, look at that. So server, default deploy. Okay, so this simple CEP is the one I just deployed. So he's out there now. All right, and if I did that right, let's see if I did this right. Watch the console here again. And I'm going to do the same kind of thing. I'm going to feed it orders via the file system. This is just the fastest way to push data into the system. So it says $64.92. All right, because that order was $62.92. If I put it in again, 129, and if I'm fast enough here, I think I waited too long. Talked too much. Yep, so it went back to 129. So these are actual order objects. All right, and then when it hits 150, it actually sends an alert to that top window there. So if I send the orders in fast enough, it hits 150, pops up the little thing on the screen. So that's an example of complex event processing. The fact that I can look at streams of data and make intelligent decisions about them. All right, and again, the data gets expired automatically for it, so you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so that's kind of a fun demo. And this example right here. So one of the things that we're working with Federal Express on this idea. So that's why I threw this chart in here. So if you think about what they have to do, this is custom critical. So these are the guys who deliver within an hour. All right, so you know Federal Express or UPS, they'll deliver overnight. These guys deliver within 1 hour in many cases. They deliver within 2 hours. 24 hours is way too long, right? Way too long. So they have to look at a lot of it, streaming data and make decisions based on that. They got to look at the vehicle event stream because they actually are monitoring the vehicle speed and they're also monitoring the vehicle's temperature for refrigerated trucks, things like that. They actually move cryogenic canisters. So if you think of like, you know, we got to move body parts from one place to another in America, they will do that. They also move munitions. So they move a lot of things that are fairly important. And so they have to have a guaranteed SLA, right? Source level agreement. They got to know how fast the truck is moving. Is it breaking down? Is it stuck in traffic? Is it overheating? And they have to respond to those things in real time as much as possible. So that concept of aircraft events and traffic flow, traffic incidents, weather, all that gets fed into the system, and then it's processed by the rules engine to then make decisions about what to do. Send another truck out, or this, based on the fact that this truck won't make its next destination, we have to have yet another truck do the pickup to get that next package on time, since we're going to miss the delivery on this one. That concept. So it's a pretty nice thing. I'll show you one other demo, not related to that, but I forgot to show you this other demo. And let's see if I can make it run. This one's much more complicated. But if you think of the business process here that's been identified, I used to do this demo a lot. I don't do it as much anymore. But I actually have taken the Spring Pet Store. This is a standard pet store that you can download with the Spring framework way back in the day. And what I've done is I've wiretapped into it so you can actually do things like capture the shopping cart. So like, let's say I want to do 20, just to make it interesting. All right? And I want to add other things to my shopping cart. Maybe I want to add a dog. Yeah, it's whatever the shopping cart is. So this application was written by the guys at Spring, and maybe I want 5 of these over here. It's just a standard web application, okay? And then I can check out when we log in. Nothing has been done to the user interface in this application, but what happens is when an order is being processed, if everything goes well here, you can see there's an order processing now inside the server. The Enterprise Service Bus is intercepting that order. All right, it's wiretapping it, is an expression people use. It's basically using aspect order programming, right? It's using an aspect to steal the order, and then it shoots it over to my business process. Let's see if it comes out here. Might have to log in again. Talking to you. All right, so this is my running business process. If I examine it, you can see process image. You can see where it stands at the moment. It's waiting for a human task. So this is JVPM. So the ESP captured the order from that Spring-based application. The JVPM then governs the process and workflow of where that order goes. And of course, the ESP is responsible for all their interactions. So intake the order means transform it, apply business rules to it. Calculate discount means apply business rules to calculate the discount of the order. Ship and close. So just kind of show you that. You can see all the data that's being gathered here. Okay, you can see the data is being gathered. And if I look at my tasks, I can hit save and continue. And then if you look at the process instance, all right, and look at the image again, you can see it's now I went to calculate discount, now it's at the review discount. So if I look at my process variables, you can see there's an order discount there of 70%. It's a really large discount. But I can look at my task begin. All right, so this is a task to approve the discount. I'll approve it. Okay, and look here. And if I look at my process image, you can see it stands as ship and close. So it's paused there. And because in the real world, right, I might have a business process that's not waiting on a human. It's waiting on some external event. In this case, it's waiting for my business partner to send me back a shipment notice to indicate that they shipped it. So the shipment notice is actually an XML file. And where did I see it? I have that XML file down here. Okay, so here's the shipment notice that was created based on that business transaction, but I had it drop in the wrong place. It's not in the right place. It has to be in this folder here. So if I move it over, and then I just sit here and hit refresh. All right, refresh. You gotta hope the demo works. One more. There it goes. Now it's in. So it picked up that XML file out of the file system, and that becomes an event which drives the business process forward. All right. So the as you can tell, I have lots of content. We're going to skip the data grid stuff, but there's a whole. Have you seen the new Infinispan project? It's actually fairly neat. I have a whole section of the presentation that talks about data grid technology and how you can use that as a backbone for your service-oriented architecture, which is kind of fun. But we'll skip that for now. There's a BPEL project, which I mentioned, Project RiffSaw. So this takes the Apache Ode project and adds some additional capabilities to it. By default, Apache Ode does not run on JBoss application server, it only runs on Tomcat. So we had to, of course, correct that. We worked on its process version capabilities because they were a little bit weak, and we're actually building a whole new console for it as well. And we're porting the architecture to JAX-WS. So by default, it's hardwired into the Apache Access 2, and we're making a JAX-WS-based version of the BPEL engine. So that's Apache Ode, and this just kind of describes what a BPEL project looks like. All right. There's a BPEL editor that's available as part of JBoss tools now, so you can actually visually edit the BPEL process. There's the BPEL palette, so you can see the invoke, receive, the reply. These are all your standard WSBPEL 2.0 spec-related activities. All right. Partner links. You can edit WSDLs as well. These are all Eclipse plugins. Everything we do when it comes to tooling is based on the Eclipse technology. At JBoss overall. And then there are some resources, so you can see some other content about that project. Okay? So that's where you would go if you were interested in it. I encourage you guys to download some of these things, try them for yourself. If you have feedback on any of these items, you can always email me. You can see my email address at the bottom of the slides. Or you can see me sometimes in the various forums. I try to get out there when I can and interact with users who are actually trying out the technology. That helps us improve it. All this technology is out there for free. JBoss can work today. There's nothing hidden here. Everything can be downloaded in some form or fashion. Sometimes you have to go directly to source to check it out. Sometimes there's already a binary that's built. In the case of the Enterprise Service Bus demos I was doing, I checked that one out from source myself and build it myself. So that engine actually I built on my own. But you can also do that and extend it for your own needs. Hopefully you found something interesting here. You know, all this JBoss technology might be a tool or something you can use. Maybe not. Maybe all you want to do is work on servlets, right? Nothing more. So I know I'm running close on time, so we want to make sure to wrap up because I know we have another speaker coming up next, right? Yeah? Is he already here? Yeah, okay. Are there any questions for me? Any quick questions that you guys might have? Yes, sir?
How is it with the high availability of the enterprise system bus? I mean, if you are using the EGDs and standard GE, then if you have a cluster of the servers, then it's no problem that if one server dies, then the other server dies. So is it the same case in the case of EFB?
It is for some things. So the question is about clustering and high availability, but it actually depends. Unfortunately, it depends. Because, for instance, FTP doesn't cluster. So if you're using FTP, you really don't have clustering capability for that. You do have clustering capability for JMS, because the JBoss messaging, now known as HornetQ, we renamed the project HornetQ. It's a clusterable broker, so that by default is highly available in clustering architecture, 2 brokers, 2 servers. But in the case of an HTTP as well, can be done that way. It's just Tomcat in that case, which is under the JBoss application server. But things like FTP, you really don't get high availability clustering with that. There are some advanced FTP servers that you can purchase to do some of that, right? And then there's some advanced like file systems as well. There's some highly available file systems that do clustering. That would give you some more protection in those 2 categories. But by default, on this laptop, FTP and file are not going to give you clustering. So you really have to look at it. You know, it depends on what protocol you're using more than anything else. If you're really worried about high availability, you'll stick with HTTP and JMS. You know, you won't do some of these others. But what our users find is that for what they do with FTP and FileDrop today, even though it's not highly available, they're still not losing messages. Because by default, an FTP server is just queuing the files up, right? It's just storing them on the hard drive, just writing them locally, and they just sit there until someone comes to get them. So that's another way to think of it. You know, they just sit there until someone wants them. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yes, sir?
Using that ATOM is right standard for describing standardizing REST documents.
Which statement?
ATOM.
Atom? From the reading that I've done, a lot of people are very much like Atom for describing a RESTful interaction, basically what's on the wire. I don't personally care. I see it very valuable for news syndication and doing alerting kind of things, notification kind of things. But if I were writing my Ajax-based web application for a client-server interaction, which is where REST is used often in our architecture, I would not use Atom because that just adds overhead. In other words, if I'm just moving customers back and forth and orders back and forth, I would just use my JSON in that case, JavaScript object notation, because that's the fastest solution on the wire and the fastest solution within the browser. So it really depends, I think, on what you're connecting the 2 things: browser to server, server to server, you know, server to the world, to the news.
So if the representation is XML, you using the ATOM is good. So for XML is
yeah, if you have an XML-based client, you know, and by that you've probably created it on your own. And I think Atom makes a nice solution for describing the content on the wire. It's fairly popular in the rest of people that I've seen. They really like Atom. But other people, I think JSON is by far the most popular. JSON is the most used that I've seen because it's the fastest performing and easiest to use for JavaScript programmers. Because a lot of RESTful interactions are for communicating to the RESTful client, JavaScript client. You know, typically that's how you see it used. Okay, any other questions? Yes, sir?
The human interactions within the business process management, You shown us how you can tweak the order, how you can improve discount. If you imagine, a huge number of purchase orders coming in, and you need to deal with them all, is the user interface kind of, is it possible to modify it somehow in order to really deal with, a huge number of whatever you deal with?
Mm-hmm. No, so the question, if I understand it, is if I receive a ton of orders, like let's say 500 orders, it would be rather clunky, right? To go in here and click, click, click.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, what typically people will do is they actually use business rules to determine which of these need to be seen by a human. Not every order needs to be looked at by a human. The vast majority just go through the system, and I use business rules to validate them. The order meets a certain parameter, like it's not over a certain amount, it's an existing customer which has an existing credit limit, it's for parts they order all the time, it's a standard kind of order. We don't put that before a human, and that's typically how you build a system. But this user interface is just something we built for demo purposes. You can we expect you to build your own user interface for this business process task management.
Can you also filter certain values out so that only a few of them are displayed and really they can care?
And this user interface is wholly yours to create. This is just a demo application. Kind of like the pet store application, it's just a demo application. We expect you to build your own user interface. This is just so that you can actually play with your process that you've created. So you can basically go into Eclipse, model out the process real fast. And you can, there is a business, where am I? So the task form definitions are XHTML. Okay? And so you would just simply build this the way you want it to be built. It all has a Java API that you interact with. So JVPM is a set of jar files that you put directly in your board or your viewer, and you interact with it through Java. And you build a user interface through struts or JSF or Scene, you might build Scene-based applications, which is another project we have. All right, let's try and build in the XHTML. Okay. All right, so the next speaker is coming up.
Yeah, maybe if you manage to prepare some questions related to the books.
Okay. So we have a book to give away. Just this one?
No. This is
not that?
This is just as a sample. We are going to distribute 3 books.
Okay.
This will be done by you and another 3 books by the other speaker.
Oh wow, there come up 3 questions. So I guess the first person to raise their hand to get the right answer.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my first question is, we'll find something interesting here, easy. What city am I from?
Atlanta.
Atlanta, right? This guy got it first, right here. See, he was quick on that one. All right, let's ask you a harder technical question. What would you say, give me 2 or 3 major technical differences between REST and SOA. REST and SOA, REST and SOA. Yes, sir?
A contract is the same.
Contract, right? The contract is different.
How much do you want?
What's that?
How much did you want?
You can, not just one, come on, 2 or 3.
Oh, sure. I think REST is simpler. No specifications.
No specifications, more simple, right? No contract.
Faster, maybe.
What's that?
Faster.
Faster? Probably depends on implementation. I don't know if I consider it to be faster.
But no overhead.
A lot of people consider it to be faster to develop with. I would say that. But runtime is probably not any faster. Depends on implementation. Okay, well, very good. So this gentleman here gets our second book for having some technical differentiators between REST and SOA. So this gentleman here, great jacket. And let's see, we need a third question. Let me see. What was the name of the project that JBoss is sponsoring for BPEL? Our BPEL project. What was its name? What was that? RiffSaw. Yes, sir. RiffSaw is the right answer. All right. So most of you guys were like, what was he talking about? Man, I apparently did a good job of that. All right. RiffSaw. It's a very funny word, I know. All right. So because you have to get your project names to pass through legal, but other people can't use them in the world, you've got to come up with these strange project names. So RiffSaw is our project name for our BPEL engine. All right, so that's our 3 books. I thank you guys very much for your time. I gotta make a trip out to Brno, so I gotta figure out how to get there from here. Does anyone know how to get there? It's a short trip, right? Yeah, I gotta find the local train station.
Actually, I'm driving there tomorrow morning. So
What's that?
I'm driving there tomorrow morning.
You going out there tomorrow morning? So maybe I can stay with you? I think I can find a taxi and then head out to the mountain. But thank you very much